Right. Okay. Ladies, wonderful to have you. Um, let's give a 1 minute, 1 minute who you are. Sydney, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Fazand, and I lead the digital practice at LaForce. Full scale, like PR, communications, influencers is a big part of like what we do, which is how I am so spoiled to work with the four family, as I call them, all the time. But why I'm here today is really because my portfolio really is like 15 plus like wine and spirits brands. And a big way that we interact with our audiences and engage with influencers is through events and tailored experiences. So it's a really interesting time for us, kind of like thinking about where we've been and how we recalibrate and maybe show up a little differently.
Fantastic. And Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the CMO of The Daily, which we always just say I'm the glorified cruise director of the magazine. That means that I work with our partners and our fashion designers and our loyal audience of influencers and models and the rest to create programming for the partners and just to bring people together so that we then have content for the magazine and the website in addition to just breaking editorial news. So I obviously had an interesting last summer recalibrating. Having a much quieter summer than I usually did.
Yep.
But I'm really excited to be back in action. I think we've just seen tremendous progress. At least I personally have in what I do. I've seen tremendous progress and positive indicators for what's coming for the season. So I have what I'm deeming COVID whiplash, where I went from 0 to 60 in about a month. But that's the best whiplash I could ever ask to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is like, I'm so excited to talk to both of y'all because, I think so much of what y'all do has been event based. And again, I think that we were just kind of like pre-COVID, it was just like the more events, the better. Like, I mean, I remember even as just having like my clients run them, sometimes you'd be at 3 events a night and you're bouncing around. It's the same people. You're just like, oh, you going over to Fendi after this? Or are you going to this one? Are you going to that one? Which is fun. But like, again, I think something we want to talk about is like, are we going back to that? And I think that, Alex, you just completed the first big influencer activation, in-person travel that I have seen yet. And maybe just give us a bit on what that was, and what y'all were kind of worried about going in, how you prepared for it, and what the reaction was. That's a big question, but I know you can.
It is a big question. And it was definitely something I think I didn't even realize the scale of what we had done in terms of what it meant for the industry until we were out of it and out of a successful event. So for everybody to quickly know, we planned an influencer and model golf / fling at the incredible resort in Pennsylvania called Nemacolin. It's where the last season of The Bachelor was filmed. A lot of people may know it from that, but it's also this very high-end luxury resort that offers everything. And this is a real testament to the timeline of what's happened and how important the planning stages of things that you mentioned. So we've been planning this since the end of 2020. And very much from the beginning, it was an asterisk of, we'll do this as soon as people feel safe. But what does it look like so that when people do feel safe, we're ready to run? And I'm glad we did that because the pre-planning allowed for us to activate really quickly when we started to see positive trends in it. Originally, the event was planned to be in June. And when we saw things start to pick up and also with some things that were happening at the resort, because it's the most popular place on the planet now, we ended up moving it to May. And I remember there was like a very long strategy call about what does that look like? Because when we moved it to May, there was a little discomfort on my side of where will we be with vaccines? Where will we be with testing? How will people feel? And what we did to address that was we were very upfront with everybody that we invited. And we said, this is what the trip is. This is what we will expect. And these are the level of safety precautions that we will have for everyone coming. And with that and being really clear about things, I think that sets a self-selection process for influencers that are or are not comfortable. And so I think a lot of it is having that open dialogue and relationship to put the ball in their court to make a decision on if this is right for them and their audience. And we have a long list, we're lucky. We had a long list of people that we could invite. I will say that I didn't have anybody say no. Except for people that were traveling or booked on other jobs. So I think that was a testament to the fact that people really are desiring to go out. And then it was staying in constant contact and letting them know what to expect. It was, do you feel comfortable flying, or would you rather we drive you in a private car? It was giving visibility on the entire guest list, which isn't something I normally do. Normally, well, you'll see when you get there. Have fun. Like, I don't need to plan a party for you. But in this case, we really said, these are the guests that will be there. So then somebody could look and say, do I feel comfortable with this person? Or like, how do I fit into the whole thing? And then it was a matter of us creating different experiences that felt there were different levels of exposure to other guests and safety. So everything that we did a small group focus. So like, to your point about going to the spa, we didn't send 100 people into the spa. We said, would you like a spa treatment? If you don't, we can also offer you an individual Jeep tour off-roading if that makes you feel more safe. Like, it's about presenting options and letting people decide what they're comfortable with and go into it. And because of that, we actually ended up with like just a very well-rounded selection of activities and different kinds of content that came out of it. So I think that there was something that I've learned of, don't just force a schedule on people. You're going to, and we got more in terms of deliverables than we ever expected as a brand, because I actually didn't say, I want 2 posts a day, I want 3 stories, you need to tag this. I said, come do what you feel safe with, have a great time, and share it with your audience, as we know, or as you know, they'll respond to. And we got an overwhelming amount of deliverables that were perfect. And I will say, we're so lucky, knock on wood, the COVID cops haven't come for us. We haven't had those questions of like, well, why are you doing this? The people that are sitting there kind of looking to throw stones. Like, it really was just a very nice celebration. And I give major credit to Nemacolin for their levels of safety and what they put forth. So as a brand or as a hotel that may be partnering with a brand or planning something, just make it clear. There were signs all over the resort that said, please wear a mask. Now, we had an interesting thing that happened when we were there, is actually when the CDC lifted the need to wear masks indoors. And so we had to sort of have an inner conversation quickly of, what do we do? And the hotel, they're incredible, came to me immediately and said, what will make your guests comfortable? Do you need everybody in masks or not? And, having an open dialogue and being ready to adjust and having a plan A and a plan B and a plan C is so important. And I'll share what we ultimately decided is, I wanted our guests to be comfortable and to express themselves to the level of their comfort. So if people don't have to wear masks and our guests didn't want to wear masks, I want them to do that. That's up to them on how they're going to share it. But what we decided was that we would all feel more comfortable if the hotel staff remained in masks, and that there was that level of showing a comfort, because I'm sure we're all dealing with this. There's a level of judgment. Are you wearing a mask? Why? Are you vaccinated? Like, there's this honor system, and there's this sort of like, it's like the second layer of the COVID police of, well, why aren't you wearing it? So I wanted it to be something that everybody felt comfortable to their own level of what they were going to do in terms of masking up or not. And it was great.
That's fantastic. And it's just so nice to hear. It was so nice to see travel content again. It was so nice to see a lot of my friends from the industry in the same place again, and see that go off with, and be really well received. And I think it will be a confidence booster for the entire industry to say, okay, they did it, and they did it like pretty big. So it's allowed. We're allowed to do it. Now, Sydney, you have been involved in, what I call the, influencer, the influencer Super Bowl. It is the kind of premier event every year, the Polo Classic. And it is obviously a lot harder to regulate, like a group trip where you have a certain amount of people going, and you can, it's a big event. I mean, how many people were at New York last year or 2 years ago?
Like 7,000 ticketed.
7,000 ticketed. Yeah. And so you take 7,000 people, you fill them with champagne and put them in the 90-degree heat. You get things happen. But that event is, again, obviously enormous, and it's a huge moment for VUV. And would love to just hear, about, as much as you can share, how y'all, outside of VUV even, are starting to think about these events, ones that are a little less, where you can't control as much what's happening inside of that inside those walls.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, mindfulness is a word I find myself using a lot because hesitation sounds bad. But we have just much more of a mindfulness about like how we're planning like these types of experiences, right? Like whether they're like large scale, like giant influencer Super Bowls, like the Buff Polo Classic, or even just like intimate, I mean, like cycling events. Like, we had one of those last night, and we're dipping our toe in the water and really figuring it out. But I think there's a certain degree of like necessity that like events and experiences like provide for us as sort of like brand marketers, especially when you're in kind of like wines and spirits. Like I always kind of I think about like what makes us so different from like fashion beauty. Like fashion beauty, like, you really can kind of like get that intimate, like one-to-one, like almost like dialogue, if you will, like with an influencer recipient by like sending them like a really beautiful mailer, like make it your own, style it your own way. Like that's how you sort of like build affinity for like your brand. But when you're in wines and spirits, there's a lot of like kind of the way that we kind of like give back to our consumers, our brand friends and family, is really by like bringing them into like our world. And we have to like very much like we have to create that, whether it's like an intimate tasting or like a trip to like a really amazing property in Hawaii, or like a giant event like the Buff Polo Classic. And I think there's a lot of conversation about like events need to come back, but like in what way, right? So do we bring back what was because there's so much nostalgia for it, or do we turn the world on its head and try to make it a little different? But at the end of the day, we kind of like feel as though we have to bring these back. There's so much excitement about it too, and we do like the Veuve Clicquot Classic, but I have brands that like their whole platform is like music festivals, like we thrive off people and the energy of people. And I think we just kind of like feel like that it needs to happen. And again, like in the right way, there's a lot of questions being asked, like what can we request, or what kind of disclosures can we get from attendees? Like we have actually a gala, right after Memorial Day. And essentially we've kindly asked to show either like a vaccination card or a negative COVID test, like prior to joining. And those kinds of things are really different and interesting for us. But these are the types of conversations that are happening. And again, kind of like what Alex was saying, it's like, what is the comfortability of like our guests and attendees? Like we spend so much of our careers like building relationships with our audiences and our people rather. It's kind of like now's the time to have that like really two-way dialogue, between them, and like really adapt and build out our programs to kind of like lend itself to what people are expecting of us or want from us as brands.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to talk to y'all both about like context and the environment that we're in, right? And Sydney, I'll start with you. Obviously, I know you do a lot of champagne across the board, outside of Veuve as well. It's such a celebratory thing, right? It's so tied to celebrating, and it's I think a lot of the marketing events and content that you've done is really like joyful in a way that's like always fun and refreshing. And last year wasn't hugely joyful for a lot of people. There wasn't a lot to celebrate. How are you thinking about like how did those brands, especially the champagne brands, how do they navigate that reality, and how do you think about this new world we're in, and how much opulence is enough, and how much is maybe tone deaf? Is that a conversation that's happening?
Completely. And I think something like, so especially some of my brands that have higher price points, for instance, like we do consider ourselves like luxury brands. And I think that the persona that we had really adopted that played super well for us, like before the pandemic, was really sort of like, we are the ringleader. Like we lead by example. Like we're doing what the cool kids do, and like providing you with sort of like fodder to like maybe like recreate those experiences, like maybe whether it's at home or outside or abroad, like in your own way. So what we kind of like when the pandemic hit, there was this sort of sense of like, all right, let's pause, you know, like we need to be okay with like champagne with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you know, because that's what like people like maybe doing in home. So I kind of feel like our tone of voice really shifted. And this isn't just like my like champagne brands, it's almost all of them. Like rather than being that like ringleader, being like more of that like aspirational tone of voice, we were really excited to sort of like explore almost like this like participatory like point of view. So like we are alongside you, like we're at home too, right? Like we can play a board game and like plus that up with champagne, and that's like completely fine. Like you can have fun with that. And I think like James, we were talking yesterday, and I was actually kind of like, like it's almost like the sense of okayness on social media right now, right? Like who you are is absolutely okay, no matter what like context in which like you're framing that up. And so I think like for me and my brands especially, it was sort of like figuring out ways to insert ourselves into people's lives, like with what they're already sort of like doing and going through. I mean, that's just as valuable as showing them like what like the premier daytime event of the summer social season could look like, right? So
Yeah.
there was so much value in that. And also I feel like we did get to know our communities like way more, like I can speak to Veuve Clicquot in particular. We have like 500,000 followers on that brand. I feel like there's been more conversation happening on social media in the pandemic than like ever before. And hearing from our audiences, like those are insights that we can take back to the brand. Like we tailor products, events, programs like based on consumer sentiment, and so those types of things are new and special. And I don't necessarily think we had that, before COVID.
Yeah. And I love that idea of meeting people where they are. And I think it was really refreshing to strip back some of the aspirational, it got to be this like clout chasing thing that was happening in travel and events and honestly just with brands as well. It's just like, do I have the new bag? And I think you see it reflected in fashion with like everyone putting logos everywhere. It's about look at me and look at how much money I have and look at how well I'm doing. And then this year kind of stripped all of that back a bit. And Alex, I'm interested to hear how you were thinking about this for the event you just launched, and how you think about it for future ones. Because again, I know like something we told our clients was like, maybe when COVID broke out, it's like, I would scale back on the giftings and things, because I think, there's already this sense that influencers are living in this like totally different world that is not connected to most people's realities. And a big part of that was, they're traveling like millionaires. The amount that they travel and the cost of that travel would probably be like, similar to somebody that is a 1%er. And so wonder how y'all, who also speak to a luxury audience, aspirational brand, how are you thinking about that environment as you dive back into events?
Yeah. I mean, we thought about this a lot with the Nemacolin event specifically. And what we decided was that it was meant to be very all-inclusive feeling and family friendly. And even that's for people that might not have families. But we made a point to invite people that did have children that could come to the event, that could show like, listen, we're going to hit this different demographic. So I think it started from a casting level of who did we invite and what sort of audience do they entertain? Are these the people that just show lavish trips all the time? Or do we have some real people, I'll use the air quotes, but do we have real folks that are in there, and what audience do they speak to? So I've noticed, and this is just in thinking about all of our events this summer and what's coming up, there's a broader spectrum of people that we're entertaining so that we reach a different type of end result and a different audience. So for example, speaking really specifically at Nemacolin, they have a restaurant on the property called Le Trek that's $1,000 meal. And it's like the greatest, coolest experience in the world. We didn't do something there because we didn't want to show that. What we did instead, we had an amazing barbecue outside at the field club that was like skeet shooting and archery, and we had this camp vibe. And I have to say, I think people act like actual camp, not campy fashion. And I think that people really enjoyed that. There was something that let people let their hair down. It felt more approachable. And that's again the kind of thing that I encourage brands to really look at, because I think they posted more because it didn't look so aspirational or off the charts.
Mhm.
And it felt really good. It was all about being inclusive. And that's including Luke Ditella's gorgeous 7th-month-old
Yes.
to, like the Suarez sisters who are out making like incredible editorial, like ethereal dress moments by a pond. Like, we were able to include all of those people and it felt very natural. And I also think our guests, nobody felt out of place and nobody was like, wait, I'm here, but like, why is he here?
Yeah.
I think the only difference there was, why am I here and why am I surrounded by a bunch of male models? But that's, I'm willing to tackle that problem.
Right. It's part of the job, that's your cross to bear.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great point just about the planning, right? And that goes down to the people, their audiences. Is this message going to land? Are they comfortable doing what you're asking them to do? One last one for both of y'all, and I know we could just talk for another hour because I think we could all learn so much more. But just real quick, I think, what are you, in the way that you are thinking about doing your job, what do you think will change? How is your thinking about your job and about events and travel changed? And what remains the same, or are you even more sure of than since the pandemic?
I'll start just as I'm off mute. Sorry. So I think for me, what's changed is I think about every single minute of the event and what people are doing and what they're engaging with and how they're going to feel, as opposed to just trying to pack a room of 400 people and like let them loose, let them have a drink and move on. Like, let's hope they take a picture in front of the step and repeat whatever. I think it becomes, and I'm not like a throw something against the wall and see what sticks kind of person, but there was a level of, how do I get as many people as possible to this party? And then whatever happens, if I had 400 people, yay, it was a success. Now it's, how do I get the right people that are showing the right thing, and what are they going to do at each minute of the event? And then how is that going to look to the world at large? So I think about things from like a narrower guest list, but a broader guest experience.
That's great.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, Alex. And I think for us in particular, I mean, even before the pandemic, we were already thinking about the way that we engage with influencers in general as like more intimate experiences. So like, we were kind of getting away from like the larger influencer trip model for like my wine and spirits brands, and seeing a ton of value from like one person. You bring your +1. This weekend is for you. We'll tailor everything for you. And we were getting like richer stories that way. So actually, Alex, and like what you're talking about from your prior experience, like that's what we were really seeing from our influencer engagers too. It's like when you give our partners like that creative license and that kind of like first look or behind the scenes, like intimate, access to our brands, you actually get like really richer stories, so that was something that we were already doing like in advance of the pandemic, and something I definitely think we want to continue doing like going forward. For us, it's also just kind of like a prioritization of like what needs to happen now versus like what can we take the time to like wait and see to happen later, right? Because like there is, I think for brands in particular, it's like, especially some of like wines and spirits brands, it's like we have our local team who reports into the brand team who then has like the global oversight. So it's like what feels right for us right now. So prioritization too has like never been more important. And in phased approaches, I feel like we don't feel like we have to do it all anymore. And I think people in general feel the same way, but I think for brands as well, it's like we can really take the time to do things the way that we want to do them and in the right way.
That's fantastic. I love it. And I hope to soon be in the VIP tent at the Polo Classic, drinking champagne with both of you. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. And Alex, I want to thank you for jumping into the deep end for all of us first and throwing the year's first big post-COVID travel event. Thanks for doing it. Thanks for doing it so well. I think a lot of people are probably feeling more confident having seen that happen and go off so effectively.
Well, you are most welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you both.